It looked like a dog, you know. They call it like the dog man or something. I mean, this thing was built. I mean, this thing was rugged. I mean, it's something I wouldn't want to tangle with it, you know.
One night, I'm sitting there and I had a dead body in my bed.
Yes, that's when I started hearing the doors opening and closing and then walking through the house.
And so I happened to look up, and I seen him. that little man dove into that water, and I heard the water splash. And I got scared.
Welcome to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. I am your host, John Methenkamp. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. Follow me on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube, Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, like, share, leave a comment, 5-star review, and that's the best way to grow the show. On tonight's episode, we have Rod from Lodge Tales podcast. Back around Christmas time, Rod came into the live, and little did I know that he would become a staple in my live. He's been in the live 3 times as a guest, and he's in there a lot of times, commenting and giving input during the lives. We also have a one-on-one interview scheduled that'll be coming out shortly. But tonight he talks about the little people, and then on his second time, he talks about Bigfoot. I hope you enjoy the show.
Would you say Pukwudgie?
How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Isn't that what they're called, the Pukwudgie?
Maybe some tribes call them that. I don't know. My tribe calls them Boksitapiks. Just simply means little people. And like
Where are you from?
Montana, Blackfeet.
Montana.
Yeah. But
So I keep telling my wife I want to retire to Montana. Would you recommend it?
well, it's if you like wide open spaces, small towns, clean air, clean water. Yeah. Yep.
All right. That's 2 votes to 1. We're moving to Montana.
You can look up on the internet. Somebody posted somewhere where I seen a satellite image of all these lights at night across the United States, and Montana's one of the states that's just dark. There ain't a lot of people
Yeah.
here. Yeah. But no,
That's what I want. I want to be about 30 miles from my nearest neighbor.
yeah, that's where I grew up. Our nearest neighbor was actually a mile away, but it's 15 miles out of town, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I
So-
stay. Oh, go ahead.
So you have I see by your name that you run Lodge Tales podcast.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So with my podcast, I kind of have a niche where all I do is interview indigenous people about their strange paranormal experiences. So a lot of the content on my podcast is from my tribe, because you can go door to door on my res, and there's somebody there that's going to have a ghost story of some kind. It's very common. And one of my friends that runs the Strange Familiars podcast down in Pennsylvania, that's where he's out of. He recently went to the Pine Ridge Reservation, and he was invited there. Well, anyways, he experienced what I was talking about when I was telling him about these. He's like, yeah, and that's what he experienced. Everybody had stories. That's kind of how it is, on these reservations across America. And I don't know why that is. I have no idea why that is, but you rarely see ghost hunters of any sort come onto reservations and investigate or whatever. But if they were to, there's so much going on there that I think some of them might quit doing it. With the things you would see, it would just be too intense. Yeah. some of these stories and things that happen, they go untold. And that's why I wanted to start my podcast, because for one, somebody that's native isn't really open to speaking to a non-native about these things. But if you're part of a tribe or you're indigenous, and it's a little easier because we basically view things the same in general. You know, we view the world through that spiritual lens that's very similar to each other. So it's easier to talk, and you don't have to slow down to explain certain things. You can just talk. And that's kind of one of the things I've noticed that holds people back. And not only that, we're taught to keep a lot of these things close to our chest, you know, don't reveal too much, you know, because it's if you reveal too much things, say about our ceremonial ways, then those can be replicated. People will try to appropriate that, and they'll hurt themselves or others. So we don't always share too much. But ghost stories, geez, everybody likes to tell ghost stories. Not all tribes, but there's quite a few of us that do. You know, some tribes are really reserved when it comes to even ghost stories. So yeah, there's that.
Right. I'm pretty sure you'd ask about the little people in the chat. I'm pretty sure from the Miami tribe, they're called the Pukwudgie.
Yeah, we call them Boksitapiks. They're
Is
like in our way. See,
that's what
you can go.
that's for the little people.
Yeah, but they're different depending on who you ask. What area, what region, you know, they're different. They look different. But where we're at, they look like shrunken people, like a foot tall. But they're not disproportionate. It's like that old movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You're this small, but you're all proportionate. You know, but just about a foot tall, and you know, they're spirits. That's what they are. They're spirits. But think of a snapshot of the 1700s, you know, Native American, and that's how they look. They even dress like that too. Just that's how they look where we're from. But
Yeah, that's what they describe here around Peru, Indiana. Is just very small people. Now I've heard other tribes have legends or lore of basically small Bigfoot, but these are actual little people.
yeah, they're varying. They vary depending on where you go. But you know, there's even some people that have how can I say this? That have them as helpers, I guess I could say, where they help them in their ceremonies, things like that. They'll come around, you know, but they're really strong. They're really fast. You don't mess with them, you know. You don't bother them. You know, if you see them, you just kind of leave them alone. You don't try to follow them or anything like that. You know, but well, I'll tell you a story when I seen one. So at my uncle's place out in the country there, I was home on leave from the Marine Corps, and I was just hanging out with family. I was just happy to be home, and we ended up going off the reservation to this establishment, but it was owned by somebody from our tribe in the nearest town away. It's like 36 miles away, that town. And so we were all sitting in there, and you know, we were all sipping, you know, drinking and laughing and having a good time, just family in there. And so it just so happened that a lot of my family showed up there that night, and they all wanted to go back to the country up on the res to kind of continue it, you know, a little after party or whatever. So we all went back, and it was at night, and it was really quiet, a really still night. There was no wind, nothing like that. And we went down and we built that fire where we always have picnics down there and stuff. And you know, my uncle had passed, so his big house was just there. It's a two-story and got a basement. And So it was just sitting there empty. Nobody moved out there yet. And his old house, that little 1 bedroom ranch house, was kind of right behind it in the trees, kind of dilapidated, you know. But we were down below there, down closer to the river. That's where we sitting there by the fire, just all visiting, just happy to see each other. I was happy to see them, and I was just enjoying myself. Well, before long, see, where he lives, you have to drive up this irrigation canal, and there's a road alongside that irrigation canal that we just call the ditch bank road, and you have to take that to his house, and then you turn off and go down and pull down into his house. Well, if you keep going further, you'll eventually go down to that river where we's at. And so as we're sitting there, I could see up the road there was these headlights coming, and my aunt said, "Oh, that must be your cousin so and so. You know, he's probably coming out to sit with us." And well, I seen him pull off. There's a place on that bend where I seen those lights. It's like they pulled off and the lights turned off. And I was watching that area thinking, "Oh, I wonder what he's doing up there." And before long, another set of headlights came up. And as I got closer to that outside light, there's a little corrals and a tack shed close to where you pull off at. And right about there, we could see the light reflecting off. It was tribal police. They must have seen our fire. And so they went to go investigate to make sure it wasn't a bunch of kids, underage minors out there. And they were spotlighting down there and everything. And they just drove by and they came back through. It's a place to turn around right up the road there. They must have turned around there because it wasn't long before they came back. They flashed their spotlight again and they left. Well, I'm still sitting there thinking, geez, I wonder if my cousin pulled up there. I wonder what he's doing over there because I didn't know where he went. I just seen those headlights turn off and I just thought he was sitting there, but I couldn't really see up there. So I start walking. I told them all, I'm going to walk up there, go see if he's up there in his car or whatever. And I get up to that spot, which is about 350 yards away, old house, and I'm walking down and there's nothing there. There's nobody there. So I go a little further. If you go a little further on that bend, it straightens out and you can see kind of far on that straightaway. So I walk down that and just see if he's there. I don't know what happened to those lights. It was weird. I didn't even think about it after that. Wow, there's nobody here. Jeez, maybe I didn't see and he just turned around and left. I didn't know what to make of it. So I start walking back. Well, right where there's the turnoff to go down into the house, there was this old bridge that they used to drive their trucks across or ride horses across to go up into those coulees and chase their cows and horses out of there and get them back down. Well, anyways, at this point in time, that bridge one side of it was caved in, so they just had these big wooden ties, like telephone poles, just these big wooden logs. That's what held it up, and one side of it was broke, and it was kind of hanging. But you could still cross that bridge. You could still walk on it, just on that one side. So, anyways, I was approaching that, and it would be on my right side. I was approaching that, and I wasn't thinking anything. I was just thinking to myself, "I'm gonna get back down there," and basically spacing out in my own mind as I was walking, looking down at the road. And so I happened to look up, and that's when I seen him. that little man. He was standing on that bridge, and he seen me at the same time. It's like we seen each other at the same time, and I stopped, and he tensed. He kind of tensed, and it was almost like down to a crouch, like you're getting ready to run. That's how he looked. And I stared at him and he stared at me. And I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, I knew they were out there, but I never seen them like that, just right there. I never seen it like that. And what he was wearing, he didn't have a shirt on. He had no shirt on. And he had these leggings on. And I could see little fringes kind of off the side of his leggings. But there was no paint on his leggings. They were just regular old buckskin, and before long, I mean, it was 5 seconds. We kind of just stared at each other, didn't know what to do. And as I'm staring at him, he finally dove in. And when he dove in, I could see he had two braids and they were tied behind his back. They were tied together behind his back, and he dove into that water, and I heard the water splash. And I got scared. I started challenging, who's there? Who is that? Who's there? I don't know why I was doing that, just military. I don't know. But I pick up my pace, and right there I had to make a decision because it was fight or flight, and I was about to run straight to that fire. And if I did, I would have had to run off of that ditch bank road it's like a little cliff basically, because it's that steep. And I would have got hurt. There's a lot of rocks down there, stuff you could trip on, and there's wild roses all through there, so there's thorns all through there. And I almost just said to hell with it and ran, but I kept walking. Instead, I picked up my pace, and I kept walking, and I got closer to that bridge because I was about maybe 15 feet away from it when I seen him, and I got closer to it, and I kind of stopped as I passed it, and I walked up to where the bridge starts. And I looked down into that water because I didn't hear him come up yet. I didn't hear him swimming. I didn't hear nothing. It's like he just dove under and was gone. And so I'm looking and I'm looking. I don't see nothing. And I got too scared to stay there. So I start walking back down. But I was walking really fast. Like I really picked up my pace. I just wouldn't allow myself to run because, man, I would have been scaring myself at that point. And I would have been running for dear life. I just didn't want that anxiety. So I just picked up my pace and kept walking. I look up at that old house and see my uncle had passed, and as I'm looking up there, I just kind of say, Uncle, if that's you guys, don't scare me. I barely get to come home, and I'm just sitting down there. We're not bothering nothing here. That's all I said, and I walk back down to that fire, and I start telling everybody. My sister was there, my dad, and some cousins, and one of my uncles and his wife, and I start telling them what I saw, and they didn't want to hear it. They it must have been kind of killing the vibe. They didn't want to hear it, so they start, well, maybe it was an otter. I said, I know what otters look like. It wasn't an otter. It's a little man, a little Indian. And said, and one of my cousins had passed away too, and they said his name. Well, maybe it was him. That's where he liked to swim. I said, I wasn't my cousin. I'm telling you guys, it was a little person that was up there. And they kept saying stuff like that, so I just got quiet, and because I didn't want to keep pushing it and get them scared or whatever. So I just got quiet and let them keep visiting. But I wouldn't sit with my back to that house or to that bridge that's right by there. So I faced it and I was just watching, and it wasn't even long before right above the house this light appeared, about the size of a beach ball. And it was a ghost light. And if you guys have never, I don't know, you guys might know what those are, but they're a light that doesn't cast any light. Like you couldn't use it as a torch and walk into a dark cave, say. They're just self-contained. They're the oddest thing if you ever see one, because they're spirits. And that's what I seen above the house, and I pointed to all of them and I said, see, look above that house. I'm telling you guys, I saw something up there. Watch that. And we were all looking at it. We all got quiet. And all you could hear is like the fire crackling. It was just quiet, dead quiet out there. And we all sat there and we watched it. And it wasn't even long. It started swirling, like turning, like rotating in place. Like imagine water going down a drain. That's how it looked. And it just got smaller, size of a baseball, golf ball. Then it just blinked out of existence. And anyways, that area, that valley, there's all kinds of spirits like that there. Those little people are in that area too. There's those other spirits too that are like giant owls. They're like 6 feet tall. There's the smaller ones, that speak. It's eerie but they're spirits. Those animals, they're spirits. So there's a lot that's happened at his ranch alone. And that Imoyitapi's in that area too. Bigfoot is in that area too. So there's a lot going on there. People have even seen UFOs in it. Just down from there, somebody's seen one where they could actually see inside those little portholes or whatever they had, and they seen these little beings in there, but they could only see it with a scope. That's how they were looking at it. So there's a lot going on in that spot. But in that house, when they finally moved back in, my cousin, one of his youngest daughter who inherited the place, when she finally moved back in, there was this little person in there that would, he was really no good. He would raise hell with those guys, and her daughters would be downstairs playing, dolls and stuff. And one day she heard one of her daughters screaming, so she goes running down and hear that little one's pulling that girl under the bed. Had to grab her and jerk her out of there because that little guy was raising hell with those kids, pulling them and stuff. So another time she was telling me she was laying on that couch that goes upstairs as the living room. So you open the front door, there's stairs down and there's stairs up. And so she goes up. As you go up the stairs, she had a couch kind of right there straight ahead of you, and that's her living room. And she's just laying there watching TV. Well, she keeps seeing that man peek up those stairs at her, from the bottom stairs peeking up. She could see his head. She would go to look and he would duck down. And he just kept doing that. She started getting annoyed. And so he did it again, and she reached down and grabbed her shoe and she threw it. She threw it at those stairs and it went down. It's about as soon as that shoe disappeared, it didn't even land. It just come flying back up and landed right where she picked it up again. He was really no good. Yeah, he'd always raise hell with people out there. But yeah, these are real. They are a thing. They're around. But in my tribe, traditionally, the relationship that we had with them is we only farmed one thing, and it was tobacco. And those tobacco societies had a relationship with them where they would do their ceremony, then they would hand off the care of those plants to those little people, and they would cultivate it all year. So by the time you come back the next year to that same area to harvest, they'd all be lush. Really, really powerful, strong tobacco would be growing there. And that was the relationship they had with them. But up until this day, there are people that still make them like little pipes, little tiny buckskin outfits, and offer them to them. But like I said, you're not supposed to mess with them. There was this lady. So my cousin, she was always hanging around these holy people, these spiritual leader and his family. They're all really into the ceremonial life. And when she was a little girl, she walked in as those older, our aunts were telling stories, and she was young at the time, about 12. You're not quite allowed to come around and listen to those types of stories when you're that young. You're not quite there yet, so they'll shoo you away. Well, her and her other little cousin, they walk in, and those aunts didn't notice them there. So all they heard was, yeah, that woman, she did something to them, to those folks at the peaks, and when she went to sleep, they kept her asleep, and they opened her mouth, and they took out all her teeth. Then they just put them back in the old way. And so when she woke up, she really had a hell of a time talking. She couldn't pronounce words right. But that was those little people that did that to her. I mean, yeah.
They took her teeth out.
Yeah.
They took her teeth out and just started back in random places.
Yeah, like you have a molar in the front tooth and a molar, just really, yeah, just messed up her teeth. It's insane, right? When you hear stuff like this. Yeah, that's why I have the podcast, because these stories never get told. If you guys want to hear that story, you can listen. You can listen to the episode titled Taryn Williamson. She's the one that told me that story.
I didn't ask your name.
My English name is Rod, and my Indian name is Xistaki Otokan. That's my black.
I'm not going to try to spell that.
Yeah, my name's Rod.
We'll go with Rod.
Yeah.
Well, Rod, I am going to message you after this live because I have a ton of questions for you. But the first question I want to ask you before you leave, when you said the little person jumped into the river, how deep was that water there?
Well, if you were to get in there, let's see, and put your hand up, about 6'5", probably, about 6'5" deep in that, because it's like a little green hole right there off of that bridge. Yeah.
Okay. And you were saying that the little girl that was getting pulled under the bed, it was one of these little people that was doing that?
Yeah, it was that one that stayed in that house. He was really no good. See, when I was small, I don't remember this, but my mom told me there was a rule because there was so much livestock around that I couldn't. They had toys for kids there, just everybody toys. Like, but you can't take them off the ranch. My aunt used to keep toys for any of the little kids that would show up because there was always ranchers coming and going, visiting family, this, that, and the other. But they always kept a certain amount of little toys. Well, the rule was at the end of the night, when the sun goes down is when we all have to come in because those spirits will play with you and you don't want to get hurt out there. So they always made us kids come in when that sun went down. And we couldn't leave those toys out. We had to always put them on the porch, my mom was saying. So they would do that and we would leave, and go back to our place. And my aunt was telling my mom one time, she says, geez, I don't know what's going on. She says, I think those little people are playing with your boy. Because the first place he goes when he gets here with those toys, like a little wagon, I see him, he's stacking wood in that wagon and he's dragging it. He says, I think they're having him help them get wood. Because that's the first place he goes is right down behind this house here, that little trail. And when you guys leave, we wake up in the morning and those toys are all down there again after we've all put them away, so they keep going down there. So I think they're playing with your boy. I think they're making him help them get wood because when my dad and them were down, not too far from there, there's some old driftwood piles and they were getting wood. And they pulled a truck up in this one way because it's kind of too bumpy and like really rough in that one area. So they pulled a truck up so close and they were walking over, kind of scouting out a place like around that big old driftwood pile to see if there was some better wood to get. And as they were walking, they looked down and they seen this little wagon as they were walking through the grass. And when my dad was telling me this, I'm thinking to myself, a kid's wagon that you pull by the handle, And so I'm listening to him and he says, yeah, we seen this little wagon. So we didn't bother it. We just walked by it and we picked out a spot to get wood. And so we were going to move that truck to a better spot that we had kind of figured. So we had to pass back through there and that wagon was gone. He said, we didn't think nothing, we realized it was those little people. And so we just left. And I said, well, what kind of wagon? What do you mean? Like a kid's wagon? He says, no, like an old wagon. Like we could even see the rivets in it. Like it was an old wagon, he said from like the 1800s, an old wagon. And I said, well, what do you think they were doing there? He says, I think they were getting wood. And we kind of surprised them, so they all hid. Because by the time we walked back through, about 10 minutes later, it was gone. Yeah, so that's what my aunt said. She thought I was playing with them when I was small, but I don't remember it. I was too young. I must have been about 4.
So do you ever think that you've seen the movie The Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes Hollywood or these authors and things, they know more than what they let on. Because when you start describing these little people and the things that they do, kind of reminds me of what they described the Munchkins as in The Wizard of Oz. They run and hide when somebody new comes around, things like that.
I wonder, because they're spirits, I wonder why they even need wood. Like, what are they doing with that? I'll tell you one more story. So, up across the medicine line, I'm talking like you guys are Indian. Up across the border to Canada, we have our other bands to our tribe up there. Where the Umpscopy, Picanni, you got the Gaina and the Siksika stay up there. 3 bands that make up our tribe. Well, up in Canada, there's this place called the Sand Hills, and that's that has a really big significance to us. We avoid it. We avoid that place because of the things that take place there. And one time there were some people that were exploring for oil, and the rule is if you're coming onto that native land, you have to hire a certain percentage of the local population. So they were looking for oil workers because they were exploring in this spot. There was a lease available there, and they were exploring, and it just happened to be in the Sand Hills. Well, they couldn't find any Blackfeet that would go with them. They said, "Yeah, well, where are you gonna explore at? Where are we gonna work?" And they'd say the Sand Hills, and who those Blackfeet would just walk away. And no, we ain't gonna go there. And so time went on, and they couldn't get anybody to help them, so they just took their own crew. It was okay, they was like, "Well, nobody can work with you," and the people that were working with them were like coordinating with them from the tribe was, "Oh, just go ahead then, go ahead. You don't have to, let you slide this time." And so, anyways, they go out and they're exploring for oil, and all of a sudden they pull stakes and they leave. They don't want to come back. They don't want to use that lease. And when they're explaining what they saw, they had an elder come in and listen to them talk. And what they described to that elder was they seen a whole encampment of little people, and they were holding a ceremony we call the Okan. In English, it means Sundance. They were holding that really high ceremony out there. And that's like our highest ceremony, and they were having a Sundance, and all of these non-natives seen it, and it scared the hell out of them. They couldn't, because things like that will distort your reality. You're not, some things you ain't supposed to see, especially when you're not from the tribes. Like, see some of those things, it'll really raise hell with you. Sometimes can make you go crazy.
And okay, so what you're describing, have you ever heard of the Moon-Eyed people?
I've heard that term from the Indians over east, right? But I
Yes.
don't really know what they are.
Because it kind of sounds, and this is happening at night.
That Sundance that they seen was during the daytime,
Oh,
because at night it kind of calms down, but during the day is when everything's going on, because it's to honor the sun, and that's why they have that.
it wouldn't be the same as the Moon-Eyed people because the Moon-Eyed people can only go out at night because the sun hurts their eyes. So it can't be the same kind of spirit.
No.
Um,
About a week later, Rod came back into the live with more stories for us. He has tales of a gargoyle-like creature and Bigfoot. Hope you enjoy round 2.
Rod, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Let me turn this up so I can hear you.
Yeah.
How's things out in Montana?
Well, they're all right. Yeah, we're about to go on a little trip here for New Year's.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll visit some family and stuff. But I was looking at the comment, and Power was talking about this. They say Mothman looks like a bat werewolf like features or something.
I can see that. I can see where people would say that.
It really reminds me. Oh, hey, you used to live in Billings, not too far from where I'm at. But anyways, so my wife's uncle, right? He's a spiritual leader. He's got a lot of rights and medicine and things like that. So for all intents and purposes, he's a medicine man. But one time he was driving on this road called 7 Mile Lane, and it's one of the more spooky or strange roads on our reservation. It actually leads off of our reservation to a little town called Depuyer, and it's just this dirt road. It has like one big curve in it, and basically it's straight the whole way. A couple more curves toward the res side, but It's like the straightaway of dirt road. Well, anyways, when you come off of the res and you're driving up that road, you hit a slight incline until you kind of level out, and you're right. You can see the Rockies like right on to the right side. It's really a beautiful view from that place. We've taken pictures there a few times. But back to the story. He was coming up on this huge 90-degree turn to the left, and right there's a fence post. You know, like how they tighten them up. They have these weird little tightening stations. I can't remember what they're called, but that's where they tighten up the fences. This one had basically railroad ties there. They're still there today, but and it's right on the corner. Here, when they were driving by, it was toward evening, and they seen something huge, just huge, sitting on that railroad tie on that corner. And as they slowed down and they looked, it it's gonna sound crazy, but what they seen, and there was multiple people there, was this man sitting like a gargoyle, and he had wings that looked like bat wings, like covered up around him. He peeked his head up and looked at them, like he moved his head up because his head was down, but he picked his head up over his wings and looked at them, and he calls it a Batman. He didn't know what else to call it. You know, if you know anything about natives, we're really literal. As you see something is what you call it as you see it. And so that's what he called that, was a Batman. But that reminded me of what this guy was, mentioning. The Mothman, I guess, appears to look like. Um, in my podcast too, there's been a few stories that were really memorable so far that have come out. And one of them goes like this. So here's this tribal police officer. His brother is married outside of the tribe. He's married to one of the show bands, the Shoshone Bannock down in Idaho. Fort Hall, Idaho is their reservation. Well, he moved there with her, and he lives on that reservation with her. And her uncle is a guy that runs sweats. He's another spiritual leader. And one time, I guess he was telling my friend that they were out sweating with him. He said he joined their ceremony. And when they were in that sweat lodge, it wasn't long, something they heard walk up, and it pulled one of those sweat lodge covers off, and it was looking into the sweat lodge at them. And he said, it looked really weird. He says, the only way I can describe it is this caveman look. He said, just really a ugly thing, humanoid thing, man, whatever it was. He said, and then it started telling people things, saying, this don't work. Look at you guys. Look how foolish you look. None of this even matters. Why do you even do this? And everybody was scared because they realized it was a bad spirit of some kind. And, that's what they were thinking. So they were scared. And for it to be able to come in there and pull a lodge cover off, that thing's really bad, because those bad things can't come around those. And for it to be able to do that was really powerful. So that's why they were scared. They realized the gravity of the situation they were sitting in. And so the leader of that sweat, he puts his head down and he starts praying, and he starts, offering tobacco and doing these things. All of a sudden they hear this sound like dook, 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 just these enormous footsteps coming toward that lodge. And that thing is still looking in there. It'd be cussing, mocking them, everything, really bad. And these footsteps walk up to it, and it picks it up. That thing, that caveman looking thing, gets picked up, and it starts screaming, let me down, let me down, let me down, let me go, let me go. And it's this frantic screaming, trying to get away from whatever grabbed it. And as it's being held, the thing that grabbed it looked in there at them, made sure they were all right, and it closed that lodge cover. And what they seen that closed it was a Bigfoot spirit. It was Bigfoot. And so Bigfoot, they hear these steps, dook, 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 and it carries that thing away, and its voice just fades. Let me down, let me down, let me down. Till it goes over that hill and it's gone. This spiritual leader had one of its helpers as one of those Imoyitapis, one of those Bigfoots was its helper. And the guy that told the story, my friend's brother, was amazed because not a lot of people in our tribe, the Blackfeet tribe, have Bigfoot medicine like that. It's there, but it's really, really rare. But this guy had that, and he got to witness it that time at that sweat lodge. So you make of that what you will. You know, there's a couple schools of thought within the Bigfoot community, like it's just this physical thing. And then there's another camp where it says, oh, it's a spiritual thing. There's also, I'd offer a third camp where they says there's both. I'm in the third camp. I think they're both physical and spirit. So we don't know, you know, as Wes Skirmer says on Sasquatch Chronicles, until we have one in our garage that we can study, we're never going to really know.
Right. Right. And if I had one in my garage, I think Wes would be about the first person I'd want to call.
Oh, for sure.
Because he has
Go ahead.
he has connections. I think he would know who to contact to make sure this thing didn't disappear in a black helicopter or something.
But again, he's pretty adamant, man. He wants to bring his pew pew. He's adamant about it because of his experience, right? Him and his brother had. It's like, oh, geez, I don't blame you, but I'd probably have to hold him off. Like, let me take your. You need to check your pew pew at the door when you go in.
Right. Did you Midwest Music Medium commented down below? Did you see the report about the two guys from Oregon?
Yeah, they passed the exposure, huh?
Yeah, but they were out searching for Sasquatch, and I looked it up where they found the guys. It was only from Portland. I don't know where in Portland they lived, but from downtown Portland, it was only like 65 miles. So probably an hour and a half drive. So, I mean, it could have been a day trip that they were taking out there, but if this is just my opinion, I don't have all the facts. It's just, you know, what goes through my mind. If these guys were, we'll call them city slickers, you know, didn't spend a lot of time in the woods, you know, maybe they thought they could just go out there for a little bit unprepared, and maybe they did get lost. Or maybe they were prepared. They went out there and because we haven't heard whether they were experienced or not. But if they were experienced and they went out there prepared, which if you're going out into the forest like that, especially in wintertime, and you know that's not farmland out there. That's some pretty rugged terrain. You plan to be out there overnight, no matter what. So if they did prepare and they did have their stuff to stay out overnight, something had to have drawn them away from their supplies. So was it Sasquatch? I don't know, but it's pretty interesting. I'd like to hear more about the guys to find out, you know, were they experienced or were they just, hey, I got a new camera for Christmas. Let's run out to the woods and see if we can find Sasquatch.
Yeah, see the traditional natives, the ones that I know, anyways, that are really involved with the old ways, you know, our old spiritual ways and ceremonies. Those of us that are involved with that, we have this different outlook on them. You know, like for one, any elder will always tell you if you see one, go the other way, leave them alone. They don't, you know, you shouldn't bother them. That's not why they're here. They're not to entertain you. They're not anything like that. You respect them and you go the opposite direction. You know, leave them alone is what the elders will tell you. Then you got the ones that ain't really traditional, and they're the ones prone to go out and try to find these things. And see, in our language, it translates a couple different ways when you say, well, of course, hairy man is one of them, but the other one is nowhere people. You know, like that's one translation, an old translation. Another really old one is basically a phrase, don't know where they come from, is another way it translates to those, because they predate us. They've been here longer than us. Now,
Right.
in or our oral history, according to that, I draw my own conclusions and suspicions about what they are. But again, if they're a physical thing, which I think some of them are, there's also going to be a spirit attached to that. Because just like us, we all have spirits, but we're physical too. Same with them. And when I've kicked this can around a lot with a lot of my friends in the ceremonial circles and stuff, and we've all kind of come to the conclusion that they have medicine too, like how our spiritual leaders do. Because there's medicines to travel, to shapeshift, to do all these things, and we all kind of suspect that's what they do too. They have that same ability that our elders have, went out and sought, with fasting, which people call vision quest. You get these certain gifts to help people, and I think they have that too, because in order to get those gifts, you got to be out in nature. You got to go seek them. You got to go out. Someone has to put you out, and you got to fast, or they just come to you somehow. But it's usually out. And where are they? They're constantly out there in all of this life force. They're surrounded by it. All the trees, the rivers, the rocks. They're constantly. That's their element. So we've based off of those. We kind of think, yeah, they must have that, because according to all of our old stories, there have been people here's a guy named Suncalf. He was able to elude the Royal Mounted Canadian Police, I think you say it, by going invisible, by walking away from them. They'd come over a hill as they seen him going over it. They're just going to catch him on their horses, and his walking. They're just getting over the hill and expect to catch him. They look all the way across the valley, and he's just walking over the next hill. That's the type of medicine that I'm talking about. That really powerful old type stuff. And we think they have these same abilities. I wouldn't say they're abilities, because I don't mean to get too religious or whatever on you, but all these gifts ultimately come from Natusi, the creator, the great spirit. They all come through him. So there's different restrictions on how they use them. And so that's why I think you never hear of people that I know of, them things using medicine on people, because that's not how it's supposed to be used. And I mean, if they were to do that, you would have SW. I'll say it once, but I won't say it no more. You'll have a skinwalker Bigfoot. Can you imagine the horror of that?
Yeah.
Nightmare fuel.
Let me ask you this. You hear people talking about the infrasound and getting zapped. Wouldn't that be along the same lines though?
It could be, but it would be more of when I think about it like this, right? I think about it as they have different medicines to protect themselves, not necessarily cause you to, say, fall in love with them, or cause you to have like some sort of a curse on you or something like that, I guess. Yeah, they would have things to protect themselves too, because a lot of that medicine isn't necessarily positive. You might have a good person that has a negative type medicine, which is like war medicine. Like you might have that to where you're using it not necessarily in a positive way, but it's positive for your people and for your group that you're with, to protect yourselves. So yes, I do think that, in some cases they have it like that, but somebody's shooting it at you, like here's this one man too who was saved actually by a dog, but somebody was using medicine on him and they shot it at his foot. And this was miles and miles away, the person that did it to him. And when it hit his foot, he was going to pass in 4 days. He had 4 days, but he knew what to do to beat it. And anyways, long story short, he ended up beating it. But, that's an example of bad medicine, when someone's doing something to you to make you just be unalived right then and there. See, now you hear stories of people actually being physically torn apart, thrown in trees, different parts, So yeah, it can be, because there's a balance in nature, so there can be bad ones and good ones, and things like that can happen. Some people have the unfortunate circumstance of running into a bad one that's willing to do something like that. Then of course you go further north, like up into Alaska. Geez, those ones don't play. They're really mean. They're really, really mean and aggressive. These ones down here, down south, ain't as bad in general. I'm making generalities, but every story I hear from Alaska, from the natives up there, they're mean, man. They're brutal, you know.
So going along that line of, the violent, well, we don't even know if it was Sasquatch, but the massacre at Land Between the Lakes. What's your thought on that?
I don't think I've heard that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd have to look that one up. What happened there?
It was back in, I believe, the early '80s. This family went camping at Land Between the Lakes in Kentucky, and when people they got attacked, and some of the reports say that when the Rangers arrived, the little girl, I believe it was the little girl, um, they found her mutilated body up in a tree,
Mm.
and the rest of the family was scattered. Let's put it that way. And after the incident, um, the Park Service or whatever came in and leveled this campground, basically cleansing the area of any of the record of anything that happened.
Yeah, see, something like that. I think a number of things could have happened. You could have ran into some of those bad ones I was talking about, or they have territories too that you're not supposed to go into, right? Like I know of a place where you're not supposed to go into, and it's got a lot of beaver dams and things like that. It's on our res. It's right up by Glacier Park. You can't go in that area. They'll run you off. Now,
So that it's interesting you bring up the territories thing, because it's also reported that Dogman is in the area, and basically Sasquatch and Dogman have a territorial dispute basically down there. But you see the Dogman more in the northern part of the park, and Bigfoot in the southern part of the park. So it's also rumored that it was a Dogman, not a Sasquatch, that did it. But nobody's ever going to know, I don't think.
right? Yeah, that's pretty interesting about that stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
thinking
Look
about
into it. It was Land Between the Lakes. I think if you just look up Land Between the Lakes massacre, you'll probably find it.
well, another interesting one was the siege at Honabia. That one was crazy. And when Wes and them finally get to the bottom of that, I don't know if you caught the one episode with them, but they're talking about, well, what happened after this siege at Honabia? Have you been in contact with these guys? And he said yes. And he starts telling that story of the woman in white
Yeah.
and how it possessed them and caused them to do things. I mean, that could be some of the things going on. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, when I think of them, I think of us. Like, when I'm trying to, just kick the can around about something, trying to figure something out, spitball, and I'll think, well, how are we? We can be possessed, so why can't, all these things kind of make sense to me when I think about it as us. Because all of us people, I mean, us natives, you'll never really hear anybody say, "Oh, it's an animal." We all say it's a person, like a type of people. We'll never describe it as this monster or any. So recently, as a Strange Familiars podcast went up, Timothy Renner, he got invited up to Pine Ridge. It's really interesting because they shared a whole bunch of stories, but that's the one thing I really picked up on is they never describe it like that, and it's always this man. He was a huge man, and he was hairy. It was a man. That's how they always. And my wife's encounter when she actually got chased by one, it paced her, and it was small, like a small one. She says, I said, well, when you looked at its face, when you seen it in that tree before it jumped down, how did it look? And she said, kind of like an apish. She says, but it was more human. Like it was like a human. She said, I can't say it was an ape. It looked more human. Then it jumped out that tree, barely even made any noise. That's what made me run. She was picking peppermint and sweetgrass. There was this little slough where she was kind of out in the country, about 15 miles out of Browning, and once it landed, she got scared and ran. She says it didn't even hardly make noise, but as it was standing in that tree, it was rocking the whole tree. Yeah, I'm talking a big cottonwood tree, and it was up in the upper branches, the ones that are sturdy enough for it to stand on, not up too high, but still right there, about 30 feet up. And it's holding the branch above its head while standing on one, and just like making this weird body motion that's rocking the whole tree. And that's what she saw.
How big was this thing when it jumped out of the tree? How tall?
She said it was only about 5 feet tall, 5.5 feet tall. It wasn't very big at all, she said, but it was built like a tank. It was thick. It was like very, very strong looking, muscly. And
So
that's
maybe
what I don't know what it is. Do they have small ones, or was it the kid? I don't know, juvenile or something. I have no idea. But when she took off running, let me back up a little bit. When it was looking at her, when she noticed it, because she heard rustling leaves, and she started looking around, it was quiet, and then she couldn't. Then she finally looked up, and she seen it looking at her, and it stopped when she looked at it, and it kind of tilted its head sideways, similar to how a dog does when they're curious. Tilted its head sideways and was pondering. It was like that's all the thing she could say is like wondering, should I or not? Like she said, that's the first time in my life I ever felt like prey. It just scared me, so I just ran. Once it jumped, I just ran. And I could hear it in the brush beside me because there's a dirt road that leads down to this spot and then back up to the houses. And it's down on a floodplain. The houses are up off the floodplain, and you have to, kind of go down in that bottom part until you get up to this little area where the road leads up, and you can go that way. Well, anyways, as she gets up there, the dogs are already going nuts. Like as she's running up the little hill after she runs about 200 yards, and she's finally up to that little spot, and that thing is in the brush following her, right beside her though. And she hears the dogs as she gets to the top, and they're just going nuts, and finally they take off, which is odd because normally they're afraid of things like that, but they chased something far. Like there's these two clearings, and she was just past that second clearing. They chased all the way to that second clearing and stopped and came back to the house, and they wouldn't go back down there after that. But when she got home, they were my uncle. See, I wasn't there with her. We had actually gotten into an argument, and she was going down there to kind of like cool off and do something that's gives her peace. Well, just my uncle was home alone, and it was her. His family was gone, and they stayed in a house. We stayed in my grandpa's old house, and he had a trailer right next to it. And anyways, she goes up there and says, "Oh yeah, I wonder why those dogs are barking." And she wouldn't tell him. She's like, "I don't know. I don't know." He just goes back into the house.
I'm going to remember this next time my wife and I are arguing. I'm going to send her out to pick some mint and some sweetgrass.
I don't know, man, but it's common. It's common where the woman's alone that they come around and raise Cain with them. I don't know what that is. That it's not unheard of though. That it happens. It's a thing.
Maybe they don't feel as intimidated with the female as they do with a male.
Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure, but that whole valley has sign in it. There's a lot of stuff that's happened there. The things I've seen alone and experienced are kind of crazy without actually seeing something like my wife did. One time, about a mile and a half down from here toward this bridge, there's a highway that goes over that river. And my dad, I picked him up from town, and I come out and I say, "Hey, we're going to go fishing at those cliffs down by the bridge." And I come, he said, "Yeah." He says, "Me, well, he's called her his wife, but they weren't really married." Anyways, they come with us, me and my wife and my dad and his wife. And so I'm getting the grasshoppers on, catching more right there so I could stand on those cliffs for a while. And he says, well, I'm going to walk this way. And he points, would be upriver. I'm going to go up this way. And there's like this little trail that leads down. He says, we're just going to go over there and soak our feet. And all right. So they go across that shallow part. And in the middle of the river, there was a log. So they sit down on that log. And he said, man, I just got my boots off. He says, just putting them on the side and of me where I was sitting. And the guy looked up and he says, oh, is this quiet? And I was wondering why it's quiet. So I looked up and the guy seen one. I said, what did you see, Dad? He said, I seen Bigfoot. And I said, no, really? He said, yeah. He said, as I said, well, what did it look like? He said, well, it was big. It was massive. He says, it must have been about, I don't know, 10 feet tall. He says, it was all black. And it was just standing still against that cliff wall, like a little overhang. It was standing in air, but its feet were in the water, and it was just still next to the cliff wall. Like its arms were even spread out wide, like it was holding up the wall. I said, did it move? He said, yeah, it did. I said, well, wait, like how? He said, its eyes. Like once I showed Carol, she looked up there, seen it, and we just start getting our stuff ready. But when we walked out, I could see its eyes. Its eyes never left me. It just kept looking at us. And I get her back to that side. I come up and here you are. I'm telling you the story. It just happened. I was putting on another grasshopper right by the car. I didn't even know it. And
So he got a good look at the face then.
yeah, he seen it. That's what I was asking him. Like, what did it look like? He says, it's like a man, like a person. It's big. But they're in that valley. Like where I grew up at, they're in that valley too, because I remember one time, geez, it must have been about 5-6 years before that. I was home from, I think, boarding school. I went to boarding school in Oregon, an Indian school called Chamao Indian School, and then you get to go home on like holidays and stuff. Well, anyways, I was back and he said, hey, come down the bottom with me. That second clearing I'm talking about is what we call our bottom, like our side of it, because the other parts are neighbors. And he said, come down here, we'll build a fire and we'll sit around. And so we did, it's just him and I, just, visiting and whatever. And he turned on his headlights. He says, hey, come here, I want to show you something. And with those headlights shining into the brush at night, those cottonwood trees, he walked in there so far and he said, look. I looked up and there was this branch. It was huge branch. Like 3 people could hang off it and it wouldn't break, but it was broke and it was green. It was a green broke branch and it was laying on the ground. He says, how do you think that broke? And I'm staring at it and the first thing is the wind. He says, but look all the way up the tree. See those ones up there? Those would break first when the wind blows, right? Because of how it blows on. I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know how that broke. I don't know. Maybe somebody pulled it, like roped it with their horse and like dallied up and pulled it. He said, no, there's no marks on that branch. Look at that branch. I start looking at it. I said, man, I don't know how that broke, Dad. And he looked at me and he said, I think it's Bigfoot. And I said, no, no, it's not. Really? That's what you think? He said, yeah. He said, I see this stuff all over down here. He says, I've been riding, horseback through here quite a bit lately. And there's these weird things all over in here and I can't explain them, but I think it's that hairy man.
So when Becca and I end up coming out to Montana, you're gonna have to take me out there.
Yeah, Tamed, that's right on the res. It's down below there. We might even find something. I know if you go over by Green Lake, by let's see, like Heart Butte Mountain, Pete Eagle's place. If you bounce over those hills, it's kind of like this windswept foothills, like you're right there, like maybe 2-3 miles from the mountains. So you're like right next to the mountains and there's a lot of wind through that area, so the trees are, there's a lot of quaking aspen through there and small little trees and whatnot. But within those, because there's a lot of rolling hills in there too, within those you'll find so many structures. They're just everywhere. And it's weird because you walk through there and you're just hunting for deer or whatever, and you don't even notice, like you don't even think about it because it just looks like random brush piles. But nah, if you stop and you look, you'll see that those are made. You don't know how the hell they're made. How does the wind do this? You're thinking to yourself. You just gotta stop and look and they're there. But most of the time you don't. Like I only noticed them, geez. Probably
So
about the third.
I was having a conversation with Matthew from Drunken Cryptids yesterday, and we were talking about structures. Um, we kind of both feel that they're more of like a hunting blind. What are your thoughts on those?
I think the same because you know what they heck they're really eerily familiar to a what we call a war lodge. They look like war lodges. That's what they look like to me. Like when I'm looking at them, like because sometimes we still have to build those. Usually just during ceremonies, like we'll build one. But I'll look at them and I'm like, man, because they got well the ones where we're at, they have like ribs on them, you know, with trees and branches. But the top part will be like a tree, kind of just folded down and then there's branches up. They look like a war lodge, but they're hard to see really, you know, because I don't know. And sometimes like there's weird trees with other trees woven through it that make these odd shapes too. I seen one of those where we got stuck. We were looking for trees to throw under that ice in the tire, and that's when I started looking at one. I'm like, hey, look at this, you guys. We're all staring at it, like, what the hell? And I had pictures of it, but I lost them somewhere on an old phone. But like, yeah, just weird things you can't really explain, like markers. I have no idea. I've always thought it was just their territory. Like, hey, man, we're here. If you know another tribe of you come in, like, go away because we're hunting this area, something like that. But
That's another that was another thing that we were talking about is maybe they're not so much like waypoints, but more like territory markers.
yeah, like boundaries or something. That's what I
Right.
think too. You know, we'll never know, but that's really what I think. Because that
Oh,
area,
when I come out there, you and I are going to find out what they are.
yeah, I don't know if I want to look for one, but I'll show you these signs. I'm not gonna go and poke one. You know, I'll let
No.
them be. I'm not gonna let the. You know, they might make you their cave bitch. Better be careful.
Not again.
You'd be wearing the apron, sitting by their little stone stove.
Oh, I definitely need to set up a time for you so we can sit down and have a one-on-one conversation and throw some ideas off of each other. But I did have one question, and we're
Mhm.
going to go way back to when you were talking about Batman.
Yeah.
Did he describe the eyes?
No, no, I didn't ever catch that part to it. No, I didn't. But yeah, I guess it looked like a gargoyle that's sitting there with wings wrapped around it. That road's got a lot of stuff on it. That we could do a whole podcast just on that road alone, all the stories that have come from that.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty interesting. But anyways, there are some things if you ever did come up. There's one place I always wanted to look at where I never really found it because people are scared of it. It's called Hole in the Wall, and it's basically just this hole. What's in the ground, but there's like a hill right behind it, and they got it covered because they don't want cattle to fall in there. But there's some pretty old creepy stories about that place, and I was always looking for someone to ride with me out there and we'll go look at it, see what's in there. I guess when you throw a rock, the rocks keep going; they don't end. So I don't know. It's really an interesting place. I'd like to go look further into. Maybe I don't know. I'll know when I get there if I should bother it or not. But you know, it's on my wife and them's land, their family land. So we'd be all right looking at it. It's just creepy.
Are we riding horses out there? Or are we riding vehicles
No,
out
we'll go out there in a truck or something.
there?
You
Okay.
know,
I mean,
we don't.
I haven't been on a horse in years, but I do kind of miss riding.
Yeah, if we went out there in a truck, I mean, on horseback, God, that'd probably be an all-day ride because it's far from the ranch. You know, it's really far. It's actually a place called Blacktail. It's pretty far. It's like about, geez, I don't know. I don't know.
I'm
It's a cool ride though.
gonna spend the night.
Yeah. Yeah. Spend a night right by a hole in the wall. Jeez. I don't know what the hell would come out of there.
Well, Rod, I really like when you come in because you have some amazing stories. Um, but yeah, so everybody follow Rod. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find your podcast?
The podcast is everywhere you get your podcasts. But if you want the members only kind of exclusive content where I save like the really juicy stuff, You have to become a member on Patreon, but you just search for Lodge Tales once you're a member, and it's $5 a month. It ain't much. And so you'll be able to catch up on all the members only episodes right now. I just released the 59th episode, so there's quite a bit of content in there. And these last 2 episodes I released for members were each 2.5 hours long. So there's a lot in there. Yeah, there's a lot. Every podcast is at least an hour long, so there's a lot, and we cover everything from the star people to the little people, elementals, which we call Suita peaks or Okita peaks, even thunder beings, the water people, the water spirits, thunder beings. There's stories of rock people in there. There's a lot. So if you guys are interested in that kind of thing, that's where you would find it, and that's how you would, like I said, if you want more, you can become a member and get a bonus episode every month. So it's kind of what I do. It's just a hobby, but yeah, it's fun.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm doing too. This is just a hobby for me, but hearing stories like this, I mean, this is the reason that I like doing these lives, is because I run into people like you that I'm probably not going to find any. I mean, because there's a ton of podcasts out there, and trying to find that one that you want to hear sometimes is hard. But when I do these lives, I run into people like you. It's like nice, because now I've got something else I can listen to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm self-taught, and of course I had a learning curve in the beginning in my audio I couldn't figure out. I finally got it dialed in, but I'll forewarn you, those beginning episodes are kind of rough, some of them. But yeah, I got that
I get it.
figured out.
I'm in the middle of that learning curve right now. I just started doing this 2 months ago, and I'm in the process of upgrading my audio at the moment. So yeah, I get it. That the audio can be the biggest thing right at the beginning.
Yeah, well, anytime you want to chat, just send me a message. We'll do it.
And that's it for tonight. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can contact me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. You can find me on YouTube and Spotify, Facebook. You can even send me a message there if you want. Again, I'd like to thank Rod from Lodge Tales for coming in. Check out the links in the description. And be looking out for part 2 coming soon. Good night, everybody.
Like we do.